Hey everyone, this is Crystal, aka Sauce.
And this is Tanya, aka Season. Welcome to Sauce and Season, a podcast dedicated to real people to provide real talk and real healing on various topics. We are both wives, moms, entrepreneurs, and business professionals. Our hope is that through these topics and experiences we share, we can gain new insight for ourselves and provide new insights for others. We are excited that you decided to join us as we take this wild roller coaster ride that we call life together and hope that you stick around. Hey guys, welcome back to Sauce and Season. Today's topic is work-life balance. Does it really exist?
So, hey everybody, this is Sauce, aka Crystal. One of the things that we are talking about with work-life balance is, does it exist? Is it really a thing? And I think when I was younger, I always used to say, I need to have work-life balance. I need to have work-life balance. But as I have gotten a little bit older and going through counseling with my field and everything of that nature, I have found that I personally do not think work-life balance really exists. I don't think it's really something that you have. I think it's something we try to strive to get, but I don't think it's really something that exists. So it was funny because I was reading this article and it was talking about like work-life balance and people always trying to achieve it. Right. And the article that I read, it actually talked about trying a work-life blend instead of work-life balance. Good. So it talked about it being a work-life blend or a work-life integration. Basically saying that we let our work life and we let our personal pursuits mix together instead of trying to have them separated. And the reason why they said mix it together and put them together is because when we try to separate it, we're not actually giving our 100%. Because instead we're being pulled in various directions because we're trying to just have work and then we're just trying to have life. And let's be honest, oftentimes we don't get to have it very separated. It ends up blending in some ways, and then that brings on stress and other things because we aren't able to have that quote unquote balance. Right. Whereas if we try a blend or integration, you have to have tools in order to make sure that you can have the tools that you need in order to make sure that you can have the balance in some way where you're actually having both the pursuits of your personal, but you're having that work aspect as well, and you're actually going to be more likely to be at your 100% in each one compared to 50-50 because you're trying to have a work balance and then a life balance.
Right.
So, Mom, I guess my question to you is, you are a phenomenal woman. You're a wife. You're a mother. You're an entrepreneur in your own right. You've been in the work field. You've been a stay-at-home mom. You've kind of been in different avenues and different stages of your life. You've been in different pursuits and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So my question is, what are your thoughts on work-life balance? Do you think it exists? Like I said, my opinion is it does not. But does your opinion agree, or do you have a different opinion?
I read an article recently, and I've been reading since I knew this topic was coming up I read 2 articles, and I looked at people who had Fortune 500 companies, people who were out there in the world doing some great entrepreneurial things. What I will say is Martha Stewart, she said something that really stuck out with me. She said when she was younger, she tried to do it all. And she felt like she could do everything. She could do work. She could do this. She could do that. And then as she sat down, when she got a little bit older, she realized that there was a sacrifice. Mm-hmm. One of those sacrifices was she sacrificed marriage. She sacrificed relationship to chase her pursuit of work. Mm-hmm. I will say work-life balance does not exist. But what I will say is work is integral. Mm-hmm. Life is a mixture or a ball of different things in one that you have to do, whether it's family, relationships, and different things like that. In the article I read with Martha Stewart, one of the things that they said, and I thought it was interesting that you said that, they talked about the fact that the right wording would be better. Mm-hmm. So work-life harmony, work-life blend, work-life integration. We have, because we live in a world where we have to work. The Bible talks about us working. Proverbs 6:8-11 use the example of the ant and how the ant went about, and she prioritized because she knew there was a season coming up that they wouldn't have food. So she had to spend, she had to sacrifice, she had to do something for that season so that in the next season they would have, right? Then we have 2 Thessalonians 3:10-12, which talks about the fact that if you don't work, you don't eat. Mm-hmm. So we know that's an integral part of life. But having a life is also integral because Christ said he came to give us life and that more abundantly. So abundant life is not a life filled with stress and depression and things like that. So you have to find a way to integrate the two. So I believe that if we are not careful, we will either exalt work, neglect life, or exalt life and neglect work. So we have to find a balance, but I think that balance is an integration. I don't think it's a true balance. I think it's an integration. It's called prioritizing. We have to know what to put ahead, what to put beneath, but all of it work together to accomplish what we want to accomplish.
I definitely agree with that. And I think, when we talk about work is just what it is. But life includes so many components. When we talk about life, we're talking about family. We're talking about friends. We're talking about ourselves. And then we talk about church and social activities and
ministry,
other things that you may be involved in. That's why I say social activities. Anything you're involved in, that's all a part of life. But work is just work. It's just that one component by itself. But life includes all these other components, which I think makes it a lot harder, which is why it's not really fair to say have a work-life balance, because work is just where you go to, but then life can include so many other things a part of it. It's kind of hard to say that you can balance that plus work. And so I think having that different wording of blending or integration really speaks volumes, because it does overlap. So instead, it's better to know that since it overlaps, how can I really prioritize work, and how can I prioritize life when I need to make sure that I do have my 100% capacity to do everything I need to do. And so I really like the article that I was reading that was talking about, work-life blend instead of work-life balance or work-life integration, because that does speak volumes in a different aspect of how to achieve meeting both. Because I think balance just brings on a negative connotation that people try to strive to get and really will never be able to achieve.
And I think that part of that is I was, in the process of thinking about some of the things and reading some things, we have to be reminded that life is so important, because we can work and exalt that area and then forget about those that are closest to us. We can forget about the things that are important. I remember when I was a stay-at-home mom for 8 years, because when I moved from New York City, I had a full-time job from the age of 16 working at the Department of Labor. And when I moved here, it was because your dad got an offer to get a full-time position with Delta. Because he had a full-time position with Delta, I came here with him. Now, when I first came, I was working. And I remember we sat down and he said, honey, all you're doing is working to pay daycare. What is the purpose of that? You stay home. I now have a full-time position. We are in a better place here in Atlanta that I can do most of what we were doing together in New York City. So how about you stay home? And I remember people judging me, because I remember people saying, why are you not working and taking care of your kids at the same time? Stay-at-home moms don't do anything. They are not good for nothing. I mean, I just had all this backlash. I had people saying things like, oh, he wanted to keep me under his foot. Now, these were people who were saved. This supposed to be my friends, He wants to keep you on the foot, so stay home. But the balance at that time was I sacrificed working to stay home to make sure the family was okay, that we could still eat, we could still do what we have to do without paying a lot of daycare or childcare. I think that work-life balance, or however you put it, integration, if you want to change the word, however you put it, that's important for you to understand. What is important to you? Is at this moment in your life, is it important that you work to do certain things? Then okay, you sacrificing time with your family. If you're okay with that, that's fine. I'm that person that was never comfortable sacrificing family time. I would not take a job that spoke against my family time. If I remember I was doing an MA. I was being an MA. I went to school, became an MA, did all of that. I had a great internship, which turned into a job. But the doctors wanted me to stay until 8 o'clock at night. That's not happening. I have 2 young children, because by then I had you and your 3 brothers. So the 2 youngest were babies at that time. They were like a year apart, 2 years apart. And they wanted me to stay till 8. Well, Dad's job at that time was the main job when I went back out to work, because it took care of more things than my job did. But they wanted me to stay till 8. And at that moment, I had to say, I can't do it. I quit. I didn't quit because I'm a quitter. I quit because I had to balance, or to prioritize. Let's use that word instead. Prioritize what was important to my home at that time. So I think that's important when you're talking about this work and life thing. Prioritizing is the word that I prefer to use as opposed to balance. No, I don't think there's a great balance in between because you have to do both. You have to live because you're living, right? You're breathing. Right. Okay, you have to eat, so therefore you have to work, right? And there are some people that are blessed not to work. Well, praise God for them. But some of us in the society we currently live in, which is not my grandmother's and my great-grandma's society, in the society we currently live in, most homes have to have two incomes. Mm-hmm. And because of that, they have to find balance so they're not stressed out and depressed with what is going on in their life at that current time. So I think I would call it prioritize. I learned to prioritize what was important to me. And for the sacrifices, I learned to say, if I have to sacrifice, then what's important to me must outweigh what I'm sacrificing at that moment.
And it's, you're talking about today's society, you have to have two incomes, which is so true. And I would even go a little further and say for those women who are stay-at-home moms, it's still a work in that as well, man. To where you will still have to have a work-life balance. So I don't even think it's just for those people who have to go out. Because I can honestly say, even for my moment when I was on maternity leave, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is literally a full-time job. And it's funny because I told so many people who, while I was pregnant, was talking about, things to do as a mom and, make sure you get rested before the baby comes and all this. I said, all that great feedback was amazing. How really is it? It isn't really something you could do. Like the whole sleep with the baby, sleep in, all those different things that they told you to kind of prepare for before and then what to do during. It doesn't really exist. So I would even say for those women who are stay-at-home moms, there's still a work-life prioritization or That's blend or integration that goes into what you do as well. And so it's funny because for me, being a new mom and a wife all at the same time, so still a newlywed in that aspect, and then just now a mom, there's so many things that I feel like I'm still learning. Right. And so one of them is trying to focus on having this work-life prioritization, this work-life blend. For me, it was just so important to have because I always knew, even while I was pregnant, I knew I wanted to go back to work. Right. I'm not knocking anybody who's a stay-at-home mom. I think for my moments that I was on maternity leave, I value that and I needed it. Like I needed that time with my baby without having to worry about anything else or think about anything else. However, I always knew that I was just the type of person I go stir crazy. Yeah. So I couldn't be the type of person that stays home 24/7. So like even if I was a stay-at-home mom, I would be having a side hustle or another job just because that's how I am. Like I feel like I have to be doing something, not even for money, just because I feel like I have to do something. And so I knew that I was going back to work. So for me, it was like, okay, how am I going to do this? Because even when I got married, it was like, okay, how do I now learn how to do things as a wife and also be in the workforce? And then when I had added my daughter, it's like, okay, how do I be a wife and a mom and be a part of the workforce? Like, how do I really not accomplish, but I think in my mind, it was, how do I tackle all these things? Like, how do I really, at the time, balance all of this? Right. How do I really do what I'm supposed to do and give everybody what they need? And I think for me, I've always been about others. Yeah. So I'm big on community service. I'm big on all those things. So I always give to others. So at the time, I wasn't even thinking about myself. It's like, okay, how do I do what I need to do as a wife? How do I do what I need to do as a mom? How do I do what I need to do as a therapist? How do I do what I need to do as a supervisor? Like, it was just all about all those different aspects, and I was neglecting myself. And so now thinking about me and putting myself back in the picture, it's like, okay, how do I do all of that
and still take
care of me?
There you go.
And that's what made me think about, okay, work-life balance. Does it exist? Like, everybody talks about it. Everybody is always going on about, you need to make sure you have a work-life balance, but is it really a thing? Or like, is it something that we're just so used to telling people to do that we've grown accustomed to saying it so often? I think we've just grown accustomed to telling people they need to have a work-life balance instead of telling people, no, it's a blend. Because if you try to have a balance, you're never going to really accomplish it. You're going to go stir crazy. Instead, you have to try different things that work for you. And I think I am still learning that. I'm just learning that, of how to really blend everything together and still make sure I give myself time. And so there are different tools that we can do that we're going to kind of go over and really talk about. And I think one of the first tools the biggest one is setting boundaries.
Oh, come on.
We're talking about blending. We're not talking about balancing, because balancing means that you basically trying to have just work and you're trying to have just life, but it blends. It's going to come together. It's just going to come together. That's how you get your 100%. So instead, we have to learn how to set boundaries. And when we're talking about setting boundaries, it means you need to have an on and off time for work.
That's
true.
So
one of my biggest ways that I've set boundaries with my job is we do have the ability at my job to download my work email to my phone.
Yeah.
I have not done that.
I agree.
So for me, if I want to check any work emails when I'm at home, I got to go the long way. I got to go to our website. I got to go to the employee section, and I got to type it in. So it's like a lot of work that I really don't want to do. So that keeps me from having to have work when I'm at home.
Right.
Because I've made a vow, even before my daughter, that I want to be able to be there for her, or at the time, any of my kids. I want to be able to be with them when I'm with them.
Right.
When I'm with my husband, I want to be with him. I don't want to be distracted with everything else, because that's how life has us in this culture. We get distracted very easily. So for me, one of the ways that I've set boundaries intentionally is by saying I refuse to download my work email to my phone, because I do not want it to automatically come in. Because if I get a thing or anything, I'm automatically checking it. Right. It's the same thing with my text messages. So it's like I'm going to automatically check it. So I knew that having my work email to my phone will be a deficit for me. So that's something I've done intentionally. And then unintentionally, I think you just got to learn when to unplug.
That's true.
That even comes with social media and other aspects. You have to know when to unplug and look at what are the different things in your life that kind of pull you in different directions. That's really good. And that's where you know when to set boundaries. And that kind of goes with what you talked about with prioritizing tasks. So I'll kind of merge them together. You got to set boundaries for yourself and prioritize what's important. What is important in the moment? And that's where you have to look at really scheduling things and really looking at how can you make sure that you're giving time to what needs that time, because there's going to always be something that needs your time. I've realized that being a new mom, I'm like, there's always something coming up that can easily take me to another direction. And so you have to prioritize, because if you know you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G to do, it's better to put them in that order of what's priority. So I know I have all these tasks, but what's the main thing I need to accomplish for today? What's the main thing I can accomplish for next week, or however it can be, so that way I am not pulled in various directions and I can have some type of balance in that aspect.
Right. I think that what we have to remember too is that as we grow from stage to stage, level to level, it's going to change. What we prioritize changes, what we call important changes. And so we have to keep in mind that we're going to grow with it. When I was younger, what was important then is definitely not what's important right now in my life. I think for me, one of the things that I had to understand is that peer pressure, culture, outside thoughts, what are you being taught? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Becomes a part of your life. So it speaks to that prioritization. And then I also think about the fact that I don't want to get so stuck on prioritizing that I have a bunch of lists everywhere. And so that if I don't check something off on my list, I go stir crazy. Oh my Lord, I have 20 things here and I only got to do 5. I'm learning to make my foundation, my faith in Christ, more important than anything else. And so because my faith in him is so important, I'm learning to take everything that I feel that is important to me, put it in his hands and say, okay, well, I need your help with this. Because if not, then you go through a different emotional imbalance within yourself. So you don't have that. Your emotions are not given to him. He cannot help you balance those things. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't think it's the work in the life that needs to be balanced. I think it's you, your emotions, your feelings, and those things. So for me, one of the things was cultural peer pressure. What I hear, what I see other women doing, what I see other families doing. That's so good. I see Superwoman. She can go to work, come home, take the kids everywhere, cook, clean. She can spend time with God. She can get up in the morning and be reinvigorated.
Still be a wife.
And still be a wife. Well, that's what I see. I don't know what she's going through emotionally, right? So here now I've taken that peer pressure and I've applied it to my life to say this is what you should be. Right? And so therefore, in thinking about this, one of the scriptures that I wrote down was Romans 12, 1 through 2. And in that, we are being urged not to conform to this world. Now, this world is not just what's going on outside of the church or the sin and those stuff. That's a big part of that scripture. But don't be conformed to what you see around you. But renew your mind. How do you renew your mind to prioritize what is important for your work, what is important for your life, what is important for you? Mm. And so you're not finding per se the balance, but you find you prioritize to say, you know what, maybe it's not important for me to cook this tonight or that tomorrow. Mm. I remember when I did go back up to work, and one of the things that I was so blessed by was your dad. And he looked at me and he sat me down and he said, I realize you cannot do everything. Mm. Though you want to come home and wash all the dishes, though you want to come home and wash all the clothes, you can't do it. So sometimes on his day off, he would wash the clothes. Now, I wouldn't say he put them up, but he'd make sure everything was washed. And there was a time where he would say, honey, don't worry about cooking. I'll go to the kitchen and make me an egg sandwich, his favorite go-to meal. Egg sandwich with a piece of cheese and some bread. And that is fine because I realize you work just as hard as I work. Mm-hmm. Sometimes even now when he see me getting up to do certain things, he'll say, sit down for 2 minutes. Let it fall apart for 2 minutes so that you can be relaxed and be okay. All I see you doing is working. The minute you hit the door, you're doing something. Sit down and breathe. And I think that's so important to have that because that's him telling me you can't do it all. Mm-hmm. And we have to remind ourselves of that. We may see other people doing it, and I am so happy they can. He went, I think he heard a minister preach about the fact that he bought his wife a microwave because they could have microwave meals because she works just as hard. Or, they had a nanny. I can't afford a nanny. By God, I wish I could when y'all was little. But little things, maybe calling somebody and saying, hey, take the kids for 2 minutes because I need some help. I did learn how to ask for help. I had a problem asking for help in those areas because I was supposed to be the best mom ever. I was supposed to pick the little kids up. Y'all was supposed to be all neat and tidy and clean. And nobody was supposed to have a messy shirt. Mm-hmm. So that cultural idea of work and life balance began to creep over into my thoughts. And so I had to renew my own mind in that area and say, listen, you can't do this. You can't do it all. It's not in you. Martha Stewart said it. She said she realized she could not do it all. And that's what the article I read was talking about.
That's good. You just said so many good points that, I'm going to kind of touch on in some way because it was just so much meat and substance. I was trying to think and remember my thoughts. But the main thing that you kind of brought up just kind of sparked in me. There's such a false sense of togetherness.
Yes.
And that's kind of what you said, a false sense of that we have everything together. This false sense of togetherness that's created through social media and even created in some way through what we're taught, in church or even within our household, that we have to have everything together. We have to present it in on social media. That's what you see. Right. You see that phenomenal woman who's, the Proverbs 31 woman who has everything together. Right. But, so you really don't know. You're only seeing the picture, but you don't know behind closed doors what that woman is going through. And I think for me being, first, a new wife at the time, I had that false sense of togetherness. Meaning I wanted to have that because that's what I was seeing on social media. So it's okay, I got to be a great wife. I got to cook. I got to clean. I got to make sure the house looks good. I got to make sure he has what he needs. I'm going to iron his clothes, make sure he has what his work clothes are. I'm going to make sure I have what I need at the same time. It was I was trying to have all of that because that's what I see. Right. That's what I've not been taught by you, but in general through messages and things of that nature kind of comes off as that's what you're supposed to do. And it's I try to mask and have all of those qualities. And then adding grace to the mix is whoa, Lord Jesus, okay. Now I got to make sure she has what she needs so we can get to work on time and I can drop her off at daycare and I can make sure he has what he needs and he has what he has to have for work. It was just so much. I feel I was trying to strive for this false sense of togetherness because that's what I was seeing from everybody else. That's what everybody else was kind of presenting. And I'm okay, if they can do it, why can't I? And so when I couldn't accomplish certain things, it made me feel bad because it's I see this person doing it all. Why can't I do the same thing? But little did I know that this person got so much other stuff going on that, yes, they're doing all these things, but then they're neglecting in a certain aspect. They're neglecting themselves. Right. We're seeing them do all this, but then they're burnt out. We don't see them where they're crashing on the bed. Right. We don't see where they're actually depressed at work or fall asleep at work because they really can't accomplish everything that they're trying to do. And so with that in mind, I've learned you have to create what works for your family.
Correct.
I'm happy for that woman that got everything together. However, I can honestly say I can't do everything on my own, even with one kid. So I don't know, Mom, how you did it with 4. But I've learned, it took a lot. I can't do everything. So I have to be okay with creating what works for my family. Right. Me and Chad had to have a conversation. This is what I can do. This is what you're good at. I may need you to pick up slack on that
Correct.
aspect. I may not be able to do this aspect all the time. And so you and your husband and you and your spouse and you and your kids or whoever, y'all have to have that conversation and be okay with working with what works for your family. And then I think that also kind of brings in what you said. When we try to have everything together and we try to prioritize and we have all these lists, when we don't accomplish something, we get upset. And that's why another important thing that we have to do when we're talking about blending instead of balancing is create flexibility.
That's very
We
good.
have to be able to adjust when needed, meaning, yes, I'm prioritizing my tasks and I have my list, but at the same time, if I don't accomplish something, no, I'm not going to get upset. I'm going to be flexible. I'm going to adjust because that means something happened where I have to adjust. And then another major aspect I think that kind of goes with what you're saying is once we have that flexibility to adjust as well, we got to learn how to delegate.
Yeah.
I think as women, we try to have everything together because that's what we're taught to do and to be, you know, this phenomenal woman that can do all these things. And it doesn't mean that we can't have those good days. But I think some days we do have everything together. We can accomplish everything, but not all the time. And so we have to be okay with delegating as women. We have to be able to say, you know what, babe, I need you to do this. Or, you know, kids, we're going to do these chore lists. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to do this. So that way it takes off that responsibility from you feeling like I got to come home after a long day of work, and I gotta cook, and I gotta clean, and I gotta prep for the next day, and I gotta still make sure that I can at least watch me one episode of something, or listen to some music, or do something, you know. But instead, we have to learn how to delegate, because even that stay-at-home mom, you spent the whole day with the kid cooking, cleaning, and then hubby come home, and it's like nothing changed. Like you're still going back and prepping for the next day. You have to be willing. I think is the first step to say, I can't do it all, and then you have to be willing for the next step to delegate and say, I need help. This is what I need you to do.
Right. I think it's a false sense of responsibility in both places, whether you're at work, what's your responsibility there that you have a false sense about, and what's your responsibility in the home that you have a false sense about. Because I did not have my mom and the ways that she was not there for me, when I had you children, I decided I was going to be the perfect mother. I was going to be the Stepford wife. But you know what? I had to realize as I grew older, the Stepford wife was some scary women. They were too stiff. They were scary.
They were robots.
The whole community was just real scary. Robotish, like you said, right? So I had to realize that I could not, and it's funny because it wasn't that I was trying to live up to who my mom was. I was trying to live past what she had been to me. And so in your eyes or in your brother's eyes, I wanted to be the perfect mom. I had the food on the table. I had everything you needed. If you had a problem, I was right there. Even now at this stage in the game, I am learning I still have to ask for help. I think just this morning I sent out a text to everyone that's still here at home. And I said, listen, I can't do it all. So I'm asking once again that you take it upon yourself to get together and figure out how the dishes are going to be washed, how the bathrooms are going to be cleaned, and how the garbage is going to go out. The other thing I had to come to grips with, and this is where contentment came in, and I had to be not satisfied, I don't like that word, be okay with what was happening at that stage in the game. But I had to realize that even if it's not clean the way I want it to be clean, I had to be cool with that. So yes, I may vacuum extra hard 3 times a week or whatever it may be. But if I'm no longer vacuuming and the people that live in the house with me are helping and they vacuum once and it doesn't look as sparkly as I want it to be, I had to be okay with that. You know, I remember another thing that got in the way of my balance between taking care of my home and my life and working, all those things, were I remember finding out that someone spoke negatively about the care of my home. Now, these people never asked if they could come help me. They never asked that I need help. But I invited them into my home and they noticed that some things were out of place. And the statement that was made was, I don't understand how God could bless them with a home when or another home, because I think we had just moved to this area, with another home and they don't take care of their house as it is. Whoa. That put me in a position now where I'm trying to clean extra hard. I didn't want to invite people over. And I think after a while, I got to the place where I said, I think you were in high school at the time. I got to a place where I said, you know what? I can't do it all. So if something's out of place and I invite you to my home and you have a problem with it, that is a problem. But you know what that taught me? To have grace for the stay-at-home mom. to have grace for the working mom, to have grace for the working parent, because we have single dads out there. We have dads that are the stay-at-home parent. So it gave me grace for others who didn't have it all together.
Because you don't know.
Because you don't know what they're going through.
Right.
Right. So regardless of what you may see, I've learned now to ask, do you need help?
Correct.
I remember being that parent in ministry who had the 4 little kids. But I was required to be at every ministry meeting. Well, who gonna watch these babies? Because you don't want them in a meeting. Who's going to take care of these kids? But you know what I learned to say? Hey, I can't be at everything. And so what I heard back about me and what people said, I got to the place where I didn't care. Because if you're not going to ask me how you can help me, well then, man, keep it pushing. That's right. Keep it pushing. So I think it taught me grace. And it taught me to be there for others who were struggling, who I could witness. I looked back at and I said, ooh, that young lady or that young man, that young family, they need some help. So whether it's I'm giving them a little bit of advice of things that might help, I might go over and fold some clothes. I might go over and wash some dishes. I may cook. That's why I always tell you, even with Grace, girl, bring her here. Let me take care of her. Don't get to a place where you're trying to do everything and you break down. Please, bring the baby here. Bring the baby to her other grandmother. Bring the baby to family because we're all here to help. And that's how I feel about it.
That's good. And I think, kind of what you're saying is why it's so important to make sure we're managing our time.
Yes.
Finding a way to manage our time as much as possible and then utilizing a support system.
Right.
That goes with having that work-life blend is utilizing your support. Whoever your support is,
Correct.
Whatever your support looks like, make sure you're utilizing your support. And I think people judging and having something to say only further validate in other people's mind that a work-life balance is something you should have.
Right.
Because you make a comment and then now I have to work really hard to make sure that I can balance A, B, C, D, and E, and F, G.
Correct.
But that's not something I can really do. I can't balance everything because something's happening. I'm getting pulled in multiple directions that does not allow me to be able to do everything. And I think you end up messing and missing something when you're trying to do everything.
Yeah.
And I've learned it's okay for me not to be the superwoman and try to have everything together because I'm not going to be able to.
Yeah.
And I've grown even just right now to say, hey, yeah, that's fine with me. I'm glad that I have been a woman that's been able to learn this early on instead of learning in my later years because that just brings on with it so much stress throughout that time where I can say, well, early on this process being a new mom, I've found that phrase of I can't do everything.
Right.
And I'm okay with not trying to do everything. But I will say, managing your time, prioritizing, figuring out what you can and can't do is so important. And setting realistic goals.
Right.
Creating those goals for yourself, using the vision board, creating things to say, okay, this is what I want to accomplish. This is what I want to achieve. You have to create those realistic goals because I think one thing that messes people up with this work-life blend is that we try to do so many different things that aren't either priority or that we don't really know why we're doing it. We're just doing it because that's what we've been taught to do or whatever it may be. But instead, we should always be striving to do something for a purpose. And so I think creating realistic goals kind of helps us have that, prioritization because if we have something that we're striving towards, anything else that kind of works against that, we're going to stop ourselves from doing it. So I think if you create those realistic goals, that kind of gives you one step further of having that blend and then taking time to rest physically and mentally and creating a routine for yourself.
Right.
That's another way of having that work-life blend is that you're taking time to rest. Like we kind of talked about before, when you try to do so much and you're part of so much, you lack that self-care.
You sure do.
So it's so important to make sure you get rest. That's for your physical, that's for your mental, that's for your emotion. It's for everything. Every part of you needs rest. Like you need to have a moment where you shut yourself down.
Right.
And I think creating yourself a realistic routine allows you to say, okay, these are the moments that I need to have rest. Like I'm not going to go to all of these football games, all these baseball games, all these cheerleader practices.
Come on now.
All of this, I'm not going to go to. Make sure y'all go to your work function. And I'm going to make sure you have this. And I make sure you also have a home cooked meal. Because I can't.
Right.
Because then at the end of that, I'm going to sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning. I got to get up at 6 o'clock.
I think Steve Blank, he is a serial Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He said something that was important. He said that you have to know what's your investment. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to make your family the priority, make that your investment. And I remember saying to myself, that my children, my husband, they were important. So there are things I did not put over them. I was, knocked down about some of the things that people would say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? You should do this. You should do that. But at that season of my life, my importance at that time was the family. And now at this age, as y'all are older, I can see the payoff because I watch our relationship, right? There's areas me and daddy do not have to get involved. And I hear that you guys have talked to your younger brother, or I hear that one sibling talked to the other sibling about something. And I'm hearing it after it's been fixed, done. And me and daddy don't have to, but that was the investment we made at that time, was to spend time praying, spend time talking about the Bible with you all, spend time talking about real things out here in the world. And then we had to step away when we had something else to do. So we had to learn how to prioritize in that area. One of the great things that is helping me now, even more so, because in my youth, I had so many plans, so many goals, so many things I wanted to do. Some fell away, some I've done, some God is still working on to help change. But one of the most important areas to me when you talk about this prioritization and balance is my relationship with Christ. And I'm realizing that without my relationship with God, without making my faith the number one thing on this whole list we're talking about when it comes to prioritization, I'm always going to be emotionally out of whack. Psalm 63, 5-6 talks about that. My soul is satisfied as with marrow and fatness, and my mouth offers praises with joyful lips. When I remember you on my bed, I meditate on you in the night watches. In those days where I feel like I have not done it all, I could not do it all, I could not make it happen. Because once again, here we hear it, I put myself in a position to be my God at that moment. When I remember what I did, but then I look back and I see the hands of God that kept me throughout the day, that made certain things happen, where I come home and dishes are washed. Didn't ask a question, dishes are washed. I come home and one of my sons has already cooked a meal. I remember one Sunday, I did not know what I was going to do. I came home and your brother had gone out and bought a bunch of Bojangles. Now, you know it's not my favorite.
Nor is it mine.
But
sorry, Bojangles fans.
But what I did is I praised God for it. Though I don't love it, I thank God that he thought about the family enough to take the little change he had. He had gotten a little bonus at work, some of his tips. Took his tips, did not even go in his bank account. He took all the tips he made for that day, went to Bojangles and bought a spread of food. Because dad was home, he was hungry, brothers were home, they were hungry. And he said, you know what, Mom, rather than you come home, us waiting on you to cook, I bought everything. He bought sides, he bought meat, he bought drinks, he bought the biscuits. I'm like, oh, big baller, shot caller, all righty then. He got money. But I thought that was such a blessing. So here I am praying to God. He didn't know because I'm like, Lord, I got to run home. I got to do this. I got to do that. And God had already taken care of it. So I'm learning to say, you know what, God? I can try to balance, prioritize, make a list. I can try to even make my finances perfect. But you know what I know? There are times that God is moving ahead of me. Not just one time. Always. Always. When you have favor with God, I promise you, it just overtakes you. Even in those times where you don't know how to put it all together. Right? Even at work. You may be at work and don't know how to do a new thing, and somebody walk over to you and start a conversation, and all of a sudden that person is teaching you exactly how to do what you want to do without you asking. You might be in school, and God can help you with that. I remember when I was in school when I went back to school to finish off my degree, and I remember I had to do so much with you all at that moment that there was a major test I could not study for. And I remember praying and saying, God, all I need is this particular grade because I need to get out of this program. And I remember saying, God, I'm going to do my part. I'm not asking you to do that for me. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to read. But Lord, at this moment, it's not sticking. I don't understand why the words are not sticking. And I remember hearing a small whisper of God telling me, this is what's going to happen. And how about at the end of that semester, it was a May semester. May semesters are real quick. So it's like, 4 weeks, you have to read all this work, and it was a science class. I'm not good at science, and I don't like math. But I prayed, and I had an A at the end of the semester. Because I took what I felt was a hardship at that time, and I laid it before him. I said, God, I'm going to do my part. I am going to do my part. I'm going to do what I can. And I'm asking you to help me the rest of the way, please. And it so happened that I was able to pass that test and get an A. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have to work, because I said it before at the beginning of the podcast. Working is important, because that's a comparison in the Bible about the ant and what was needed to be done. Man that don't work don't eat. That's another comparison, right? But we do have to know how to prioritize, because if not, fear, false sense of responsibility, the desires of our heart, greed, lack of contentment, jealousy, those things will get in the way and help and make it so that we put one thing above the other instead of remembering what's important.
That's true. And I think, everything you said just goes back to what we was talking about before with asking for help. However, we're asking for help from the main source, the main person that can provide it, which is God. We can have everything that we talked about because, like I said, it's very important when you're talking about having a work-life blend, prioritization, integration, whatever word you want to use.
Yes.
As we talk about having that, it's very important to have these tools that I've discussed and we've talked about. However, you got to also make sure that the main source is God. And a lot of times, I think that's where we fail because we try to do everything on our own. That still goes back to delegation. You can't do everything. You better delegate some things to God because He's the main person that can and will
let Him have it
and shall do it. So you better know who to delegate to, what you need to delegate to. However, like you said, we can't just expect to neglect everything at the same time. That doesn't mean, I throw my hands up, I can't do it.
Forget it.
Work-life balance doesn't exist. I'm just going to throw my hands up. Not at all, people. You can't neglect everything. However, you can't make everything so firm that when something doesn't work out the way that you feel like it should have worked out, you break.
Yeah.
And you can't try to do everything so much on your own that you break. It's so important to make sure you have that capability of saying, you know what, this is something that needs to be done. I'm going to prioritize in the best way I can and everything else. And I think one major thing that I would like to add into all that we're discussing is, of course, the main thing is making sure you ask from God, for the help that you need. However, another main thing that I will also say is when you're prioritizing, make sure you schedule you time.
Mm-hmm.
I think, after talking about making sure that we go to God for what we need, everything else that we kind of discuss is so important. However, I would say the number one important thing goes back to what we kind of talked about in the last podcast, which is self-care. So to me, after, my main source of God, I'm going to schedule me time. So when I'm prioritizing, if you're a calendar person and you like to utilize a calendar, schedule me time. If you're the person that likes to write things down on something, schedule me time. However you like to do it, make sure you put in time for yourself because like we talked about in our last podcast of self-care, if you are not whole, how can you possibly do anything else for anybody else?
Yeah.
You automatically fail this work-life balance that doesn't really exist anyway because you try to do everything for everybody that you neglect yourself. Like I talked about, work is one aspect, but life includes family, friends, church, social activities, whatever you have, and then most importantly, it includes yourself.
Yeah.
And if you can't be whole within yourself, how can you really do anything for anybody else? How can you have a blend? Right. Because you've already neglected yourself. You don't have the physical health. You don't have the emotional health. You don't have the mental health because you're broken, because you're trying to be superwoman. You're trying to reach this work-life balance that you neglect yourself. And nothing gets accomplished. Because if I'm shut down, how can things get accomplished?
I agree.
It's the same thing for as women, when our husbands get sick, it's like full-blown baby mode. I don't know what happens, but it's like, I don't know what overcomes. Sorry, my man. But I've seen it with my own eyes multiple times. It's like, you are too big to be in baby mode right now. No, sir. But as a woman, when we shut down and we sick, we still gotta
do everything. Nobody know how to make anything.
If we don't do anything, it's gonna fall apart. You know what I'm saying? And so, just with that analogy by itself, we are already created to where we have to do so much for so many people. So you have to make sure you are healthy.
I think it's funny you said that because I think Pastor talked about that. Like men are like waffles, I think he said. So they decompartmentalize, whereas women are like spaghetti. We just touch everything. Everything mingles together. But I think that can either be a good thing or a bad thing. Because we put everything together, we try to do everything. And we can't do everything. We just can't. And I know that if men decompartmentalize, then that's a problem too if they don't know how to touch or help with some other areas. So I think it is so important that we remember that, work life prioritization or blend, whatever you want to call it, is important. We have to schedule time. And I think I've learned something from my pastor and my first lady that was important. Scheduling that time with God. Those are some of the lessons we have learned. Scheduling that time for self. Scheduling that time for we. Mm-hmm. Okay, whether that's husband and wife. Scheduling that time for family. Mm-hmm. It's that we have to make those things important. And at the top of my list, I am learning in my life, again, how important it is to make God first and foremost in my life. To spend time in my Bible, spend time studying, spend time reading, spend time listening to the word. Cut off some social media, because I'm a big social media girl. And the reason being is because I don't watch a lot of TV, so social media became my thing. So I think that now I had to find out for myself what was important. And so I've even learned that social media can't take that place. Social media can't be in that place of where God's supposed to be. So it's important for us to remember as we close that we have to have work life blended integrally together and not try to overwhelm ourselves with trying to make it balanced, because it may never be balanced, because storms come. That's why I love the palm tree. Because when the storms come, it bends with the wind. When the wind's gone, it stands back up. God has things in nature that teaches us how to move. It reminds us of his hand.
So we both want to thank you for listening in today and want to encourage you to go and like our Facebook page and Instagram page, Sauce and Season, if you haven't already. On both platforms, you will find a post titled Today's Podcast, and we would love for you to go under there and post your thoughts and feelings regarding this week's podcast, and also encourage others to listen in. We hope that you were blessed in some way with today's podcast, and hope that you join us again for next week's podcast titled Forgiven Doesn't Mean Forgetting, which will be released on Tuesday. Thank you and have a blessed day.